Hello everybody, this is Mehrdad Moradi, and in this presentation I'm going to present exploring fault parameter space using reinforcement learning based fault injection. I would start with the context, then I will explain the fault injection, what is the research problem in the fault injection, then I explain a motivating example that our technique is developed based on that, then I explain the reinforcement learning that we are focusing on, and then results, conclusion, and the future work. In context, we know that modern safety critical cyber physical systems are very complex. For example, here is a modern car that is consists of many ECUs, and the number of the ECUs is exponentially growing, and this complexity make the system error prone and also make the testing process very costly for the vendors. Vendors are interested in the dependability analysis in order to check the system reliability, determining the failure modes, check the safety properties, robustness, or etc. And one way to do dependability analysis is the fault injection, which the testers stress the system, which can be a virtual system or real system. They stress the system in an unusual way in order to observe the system behavioral. So what they basically do is they have an original system, or here is the original model. They run the simulation or experiment, they store the result, and then they have a bunch of faulty simulation or faulty models that there is a fault within those systems, and then they run those simulation as well, and then at the end they compare the result from the faulty runs with the golden runs to see the system behavioral. Uh, in the fault injection, fault has three main dimensions. One is the activation time of the fault, another is the location of the fault in the system, and the third one is the type of the fault. And we are interested to having to finding a critical fault that can fail the system. This fault space is very huge, and most of the faults that we are activating are masked somewhere between and don't lead a failure at the end. Fault injection traditionally has been done on the hardware base. In the hardware base, when the testers bombard the hardware with high energy radiation. Then we had the software-based fault injection, which developers mutate some operands or operators or some variables from the source code. And also we have model implemented fault injection that we inject the fault in the model, and we observe the behavioral of the virtual model. And in this paper, we mainly focused on this model implemented fault injection. The research problem in the fault injection is that exploring the fault space is very costly because it's very huge, and also the critical faults within the system are not are very costly to find them. For example, here we have a fault space. It's actually is a not a real fault space. Just to clarify, we have like a 3D dimension from the fault space, which we have the amplitude of the fault, injection time, and location of the fault. And these red regions indicating some critical region that can affect the system property. And in this research, we are working on a searching method to find critical fault within these red regions. As a motivating example, we use adaptive cruise control in the Simulink. Adaptive cruise control is consists of two cars, a ego car and a lead car. In the ego car, adapt its velocity uh, in order to keep the safe distance adaptive cruise control here has two modes, the speed mode and the spacing mode. In the speed mode, it increase the speed in order to reach to the predefined speed, and in the spacing mode, it tries to decrease the speed and acceleration in order to make the actual distance larger. And the safety requirement here is that the actual distance must be greater than the safe distance. Here is the original simulation in 2D visualization. Here we have the eco car, and here is the lead car. You can see its speed is increasing and it's closer to the purple car, and after it gets closer, its speed decreases in order to keep the safe distance. In the proposed method, we use the reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning has this structure that we have the environment and the agent. Environment and the agent interacts by action signal and the observation signals. Our algorithm here tries uh, to take the best action in order to collect the higher reward. And we combine this structure with our example with the model of the vehicle and model of the controller. We put them all in the environment section, and also we add the fault injector here in between. The fault injector inject the fault in the adaptive cruise control, and the fault parameter is controlled by this reinforcement learning algorithm by this agent, which the agent gets some reward functions from the simulation, from the observation. It tries to predict the critical fault. It put it in the fault injector inject that, and then it runs the simulation, and eventually it try to converge to the critical fault. And at the end, we have this implementation, which we have here is the controller and the vehicle, and here is the agent and the fault injection part. The agent has two parts, three main parts: reward and fault injection part. In the reward, we implemented this reward function, and which is represented here in the model level. The reward function is basically implemented based on the relative distance, velocity of the car, and the simulation time. And this reward function must be defined in a way in order to convey the agent toward the critical fault faster. And for the fault injector, we have the stack to value fault that before the injection time, before the activation time, the velocity of the car is the real velocity, but after the injection, the velocity of the car will be equal to a fixed value, and here is the model representing this equation. By running the simulation, the controller, the RL, pushed the system into the failure by injecting the fault injection continuously, measuring the reward function, and trying to find the most to the trying to inject another fault which has more impact than the previous one. And just to clarify the process, if you assume that here is the search space, the RL tries to find these peaks here, which are the critical faults. So the RL agent start with the initial value. It look for a neighborhood that has a higher reward value. Then it it switch to that neighborhood, and again for that neighborhood it search to another neighborhood that has the higher reward value, and it eventually tries to explore this space to reach some critical fault, or to reach a higher value fault and locations. And by learning process, we will reach to these diagrams, and the peaks here are indicating critical faults, and we can find the fault amplitude and the injection time in these peaks. And if we use these parameters in these peaks, we have we can have a faulty simulation that create a crash or violate the safety. So here is the faulty simulation. The ego car is increasing its speed. Here is the lead car. It detects the lead car, but the fault is injected and the ego car cannot decrease its speed. So the safe distance is violated, and yeah, we have a small crash here. As a result, we have a trace from the normal simulation and the faulty simulation. In the normal simulation, the relative distance is always bigger than the safe distance, but here in this region we can see that the relative distance is smaller than safe distance, and it violates the safety specification. Also, we compared our method with the Monte Carlo fault injection, which is a random-based fault injection. We use two metrics. One is the number of the simulation to find the first critical fault, and another is the total number of the critical fault that the method can find it. We can see that our method find the first fault after 3 simulation, but the Monte Carlo find it after 15 simulation, and our method find 19 critical faults, while the Monte Carlo method can only find 3 critical faults. Another outcome of this paper is lesson learned, and in the lesson learned, we learned how to shape fault space searching problem into a setup that the RL can explore it. So we learned that we need the domain knowledge about the model and the testing scenario, about how many modes the model under the test have. It's about the signal ranges, continuity or discontinuity, and about the other actors and deriving scenarios and the environment in the testing scenario. And based on this knowledge, we can choose a proper setup for the RL for both the policy and the reward function. And the reward function mainly is a reverse of the safety requirement, but for the structure of the policy, we need more information about the scenario under the test. In conclusion, we use the RL to efficiently explore the fault space. Also, we have an automatic way to find the catastrophic situation, and we have a lesson learned how to shape our fault space searching problem to the RL solution. And in the future, we will use the stochastical policy that makes the method more efficient and more performant. Also, we are going to include domain knowledge in a systematic way, defining some steps that if the tester follow those steps, it will reach to the solution very faster. And at the end, thank you for your attention.